welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. Little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP and you're going to get 10% off your order. With that code FNP at simbody.com, you're really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.
A last look at the big card. Be sure to head into the chat and have your say. Let's get into it and join in Fight Night Picks ? Kicks.
Oh boy, just like that, we're back and we're set for Fight Night Picks ? Kicks. UFC Fight Night, Andrade versus Blanchfield. As you can probably tell, I'm slightly under the weather. So we're separated this week, Matt, but I think I'll be good to go. I should be good to go when we get ready for Krylov versus Span. That's next weekend's card. Some people were thrown off by that. They said, hey, where's the video for Krylov Span? And I said, hey, it's next weekend. But Matt, this is one of those weeks, and both of these weeks are going to kind of melt into the same a little bit because we have 6 debuting fighters coming up on this weekend's card. How many debuting fighters on next weekend's card, Matt? Do you know?
Not off the top of my head. A lot of
7. Ooh, 7 debuting fighters. So a lot of debuting fighters on these cards. A lot of stuff to look forward to. Over there in the comments section, Prince Vegeta-san, hey, what is y'all's outro song? I really like it. The intro song was one of those YouTube, what do they call it? YouTube audio library songs. But every now and again on these fight weeks, they end up being the old Davidson Baker tunes. So Davidson Baker, what a guy. Orlando saying, bro, are the GOATs. And I know Craig's watching Brave CF on the side right now. No, I'm not, Darion. So sorry to say that. Eric Cote saying, let's get into it. So Matt, I mean, overall on this card, everybody in shape, especially William Knight. Everybody on weight, especially William Knight. You love to see that. His last 2 fights, 218, 251, this time 206. So did anybody surprise you on the scale? Was there anything that you were really looking forward to yesterday, kind of keeping your eye on?
Not really. Like, it's nice to see Alexander Hernandez not kill himself to make 145 like he had to his last time out. And I know we have differing picks on that fight, but that's still a really entertaining and interesting fight on this card because if Hernandez is able to win, it kind of restarts his career a little bit because, again, a win over Jim Miller is such an important win for anybody in their career, no matter what stage they're at. But Jim Miller's still a very difficult guy to beat at this stage of his career, so I just think that's a really fun fight. It's just nice to see Hernandez back to the weight class that he should be at.
And when you do look at it, Matt, like I was looking it up there and my eyes might go all over the place because I got one laptop open. I'm looking at the other screen. I got the comments going. I got the fight card. So I'm kind of everywhere trying to make sure I look at you folks. But yeah, for Alexander Hernandez, when he went down to 145 pounds, lo and behold, it's kind of like that Trey Lewis country song that blew up on TikTok. Getting dick down in Dallas. He wasn't dicking down anybody in Dallas going to 145. It was not working for him. So a big time opportunity for him at lightweight. As you folks always know, Fight Night Picks, ? Kicks. We go bottom to top with these cards. And then right at the end, we reset. We go back down through all of them. Seems like a lot of people are really looking forward to that William Knight fight over there. So I'll bring up a couple of your comments there. We have Lord Nikon saying, like button, crush it. So we'll see how that one goes. Make sure you toss out those likes. And we'll start the card off, Matt, with a fight that I know you're really excited about. Juancamilo Ronderos taking on Concrete Clayton Carpenter. And for both of these guys, each looking for their respective first UFC wins. Ronderos had the opportunity on what? A day's notice? We hear some fighters getting these chances where it's like, hey, you got like 3 days notice or a week's notice. He took that fight on a day's notice, replacing Raulian Paiva, taking on David Dvorak. And in that one, he didn't really have any moments. He got choked out really quickly. We didn't really learn a lot. He busted his elbow in training. So he's had a really long time to kind of work through those injury issues, doing a little bit of coaching on the side at Extreme Couture. You know how polished his striking can be, his defensive grappling, I guess I should say, like his takedown defense we've seen in the past. Obviously, his record has that nice win over Eric Shelton, and he had a nice mix of pro and amateur experience coming into the UFC. It was just, again, too much too soon, too short notice, and he's taking on Clayton Carpenter in this one, a guy who I like coming in on Dana White's Contender Series, but I might not have necessarily been sold on him. And he definitely had a big learning curve thrown at him in that first round where he got tagged up a little bit against Shaidas. And then round 2, round 3, he was able to win out, really impressed in that fight. So I know we touched on this one in some pretty good depth earlier on in the week. I guess, no, it wasn't earlier on in the week. It was like this time last week because we did the video on Friday. So it's been a long time. But your final thoughts on this fight, because I know you're really excited about it. Fender Jazz saying, hey, from Ottawa, everyone. Good old Ottawa, nation's capital.
I'm excited for this fight, but the thing is with Ronderos, there's too many question marks at this point in his career, and it's a lot like when we were talking about Zaruk Adashev last weekend. It was, hey, I would love to just talk about his skills and talk about how good of a fighter he is.
You talked about Zaruk Adashev last week?
No, sorry, Sabayar Tukhugov, my bad. Sabayar Tukhugov, it would be great to just talk about his skills and nothing else and not the weight misses or any controversies, but that always seems to be where the conversation gets steered. And for Ronderos, it would be really nice if he did have another fight in between the Dvorak fight and the Carpenter fight, just so we get a better sense of where he is in his career, because he's still a young guy who doesn't have a ton of pro experience. So I do think that there is growth to be made in his career, but Clayton Carpenter has lasting power, and he can face adversity and get strong after that, which isn't something we always know about prospects. But with Carpenter, like you had mentioned, his last time out there, it was a tough first round for him, but he did get stronger as the fight continued. And I think that's really going to help him in this matchup.
Yeah, it really is a tough one when you're looking at this one stylistically, because again, both guys, they have a decent mix of amateur experience. For Carpenter, he went 6-1 as an amateur and 6-0 as a pro. And for Carpenter and his background, well, it's like if a guy filled out a resume with every single thing he's done since high school. Like I took out the garbage. I did a little bit of laundry. Like I was out there mowing the front lawn for him. USA Junior National Muay Thai champ, 4-time Muay Thai national champ, Junior Golden Gloves champ, World Junior Grappling Pancration medalist, IBJJF World champ, gi and no gi. So a decent mix of experience there for Clayton Carpenter. And in this matchup, if I'm not mistaken, he is a pretty heavy favorite in this one, -316 right now. Ronderos +253. For me, I do have Clayton Carpenter in the matchup. Again, we kind of said this before. Ronderos could surprise a lot of people. He could surprise us as well in this matchup. Like, you can't overlook a win over Eric Shelton. I know he didn't really have the lasting power in the UFC, but some parallels you can draw with Shelton's game and Carpenter's game. But I think we're both in agreement on this one with Carpenter in the matchup.
I would say, yeah.
Okay, so we move on to our next fight, Matt. AJ Fletcher taking on Themba Gorimbo. And a lot of people are kind of all over the place on this fight. Like, they were a little bit surprised with the weigh-ins, and obviously, you know, Gorimbo's got a bigger frame than a guy like AJ Fletcher. I said Fletcher probably has a fluffer at 5'10", because I don't think he's actually 5'10". I guess we'd have to see if we stood next to him or if we brought the tape measure. But when we do look at this fight, Matt, I mean, for Fletcher, he was a one-hitter quitter first round type of guy on the regional scene. He's a guy that added wrestling as a component to his game as it's gone on. And for Gorimbo, like, you talk about a guy that likes to strike from long range, go balls to the wall. It's Themba Gorimbo fights over at the FC. And his fight with UAE Warriors against Henderson Fahea, like, he was going for really long range takedown attempts. He was getting kind of bucked off. He was getting reversed. And then he ended up in a lot of really, really bad positions. So MPTV saying Themba's horrible. I don't know if he's horrible, but I will tell you, like, AJ Fletcher in his last fight against Ange Lusa, not being able to figure out the distance, slowing down round 2, round 3, he got pieced up in that fight. And there's a lot of reasons why you might like Fletcher. There's vice versa. There's a lot of reasons you might like Gorimbo, but I could see this fight. If this fight goes past the first round, it could get really sloppy round 2, round 3.
100%. Like, last night was the Celebrity All-Star Game for the NBA, and DK Metcalf won the All-Star Game MVP. DK Metcalf's one of the craziest athletes in the world.
Did you see that video of him jumping up to catch that football?
That's fake, but he can still jump. Anyways, the whole thing about DK is he plays basketball like a guy who just has athleticism turned up to like 100 out of 10. He can dunk, he can block, but he can't dribble or do like the more finesse kind of moves. That's what AJ Fletcher is to MMA. His takedowns are more athleticism based than they are like Daniel Cormier chain wrestling. His knockouts and his flurries are all just, I'm kind of winging for the fences and hoping for the best to happen. And that's why with Fletcher, it's always going to result in a pretty entertaining fight, but it's really difficult to project a high ceiling for him. And this fight against Gorimbo, listen, could both of them go in there and get a first round knockout? Easily. And that's why this fight is so difficult to predict, is because Fletcher brings such a big storm. But if you can weather it, it's not that big of a deal on the other side of it. Like you said, if you can make it to the second or third round, a lot of his opponents can weaponize their own cardio and make that an asset. For Themba, I'll be very curious to see how he looks in that same situation, because I agree with you. I don't think this is going to be the best fight to watch if it does get past that like 2.5 round mark. Oh, muted.
The thing, and listen, it's you, it's me, it's not you this time. I mean, sick brain. We'll blame it on that. But the thing that I don't understand about this one, Matt, is people that are over there in the comment section kind of going off the fact that like it's a bit of a setup fight for Fletcher. It was a setup fight for Billy Goff, and Billy Goff is supposed to get the win against Gorimbo. Hey guys, why would they do that in the man's debut fight in the UFC for Themba
What
Gorimbo?
are we setting AJ Fletcher up for? Like, is AJ Fletcher looked at as a top tier prospect? He's 0-2 in the UFC up until this point.
We'd really like to just sign a guy to throw him to the wolves and hopefully he gets a loss. No, they wouldn't do that. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But when I look at a guy like AJ Fletcher, he's got the takedown ability. He's got decent ground and pound. And when I look at a guy like Themba Gorimbo, he's a mix of two fighters that I've seen fight in the UFC. One guy, it might be me getting caught up in the moment of recency bias. The other guy, we saw him come and go very quickly between two divisions. Themba Gorimbo is like if you took Blake Builder and merged him in with the same fighter that is Kama Worthy. Long-range striking attacks, big-time actions, like decent takedown attempts in jiu-jitsu. But for Themba Gorimbo, the trouble is he gets hit. And Gorimbo, I've seen Gorimbo, again, I went through some of these fights. We talked about the fight against Michael when he was at the UFC. He got taken down. He had to reverse the position. The fight that he had after that, he got rocked. Like, he gets hit really, really hard in some of these fights and rocked. But likewise, he does have decent striking from range. He just likes to crash to the distance and land big power shots. So for me, I mean, AJ Fletcher open to -160. He's almost a -300 right now. That's kind of wacky. Themba Gorimbo +240 right now. So I do like in the matchup AJ Fletcher, but my goodness, like people are really kind of betting that line down, and that's kind of scary.
Even if Fletcher wins this fight, it's going to be like, hey, he has 2 losses and a win over Themba Gorimbo. So, like, this isn't the win that's then going to set him off to the top 15, but I still think he's going to win this fight.
Yeah, I mean, he had a good first round against Matt Semmelsberger on short notice. It surprised some people, but apart from that, like the guys that he fought, not a good level of competition coming into the UFC. So, Matt, we get into our next fight, and Philipe Lins coming in a trim 203.5, taking on Ovince St. Preux 206. I love it when OSP is able to make the weight, so kudos to him. 206. We've seen him miss weight before at light heavyweight, so a good look right there. Philipe Lins picked up his first win at the light heavyweight division since what, like 2015, 14? Like a big win his last time out against Marcin Prachnio, who's also on this card. For Lins, he has the more complete skill set that we see more often. I think that's fair to say. His takedowns, he's just kind of a grinder against some of these, you know, bigger guys, these skilled guys. For Ovince St. Preux, plotting, southpaw, big time kick, roundhouse, big time left hand, nice arm locks. It really is a tough fight to try and pick. I know you and I, we were split on this one at the start of the week. And Bartholomew of Haywood, this has to be OSP's last fight in his career. Hard to say, but yeah, when you look at this one, Matt, this is very much a fight we would have seen like 5-6 years ago. It's not a 2008 light heavyweight fight, but it's very much 2015 light heavyweight fight.
I thought Philipe Lins looked really good on the scales. For a guy who, listen, doesn't normally look great at heavyweight, to quote you, kind of built like a bag of milk, I thought he looked pretty good at 203. So we'll be curious to see just how good his cardio holds up in this matchup, because I do think that's going to be the key for him. You bring up his grinding style. That does equal activity, and that normally is the key when you're fighting a guy like OSP, because outside of his big actions, and he still does have those big actions, like I think this fight's going to look a lot like the Ben Rothwell fight did for OSP, just down at 205 and not at the heavyweight division, because Philipe Lins is a guy who's going to march forward, put his head under your chin, get in that uncomfortable clinch position, and again, just be active throughout the fight. Now, if he gets dropped by a couple big shots, I actually think this is one of those weird fights, just like the Ben Rothwell fight, where OSP could hurt Rothwell, but still not really win the rounds just because he's not doing that much outside of those big actions. And again, that's what I keep on going back to. I just don't think OSP can do enough round after round to go out there and win on the judges' scorecards. And I don't see either guy being able to get a finish. So for that reason, that's why I do find myself picking Philipe Lins. I would love to be proven wrong because growing up, I always thought OSP was a cool fighter. He's a cool southpaw who throws high kicks, and we don't really see his skill set all that often in this division. I just think his time as being one of the top fighters at 205 is a little bit past him. Wow.
If you forget about the fight that Tanner Boser had with Philipe Lynch, just erase that from your memory. Think of the fight that Tanner Boser had against OSP. What do? Pressured him, got him back against the cage. OSP ducks. Boser hits him with that tricky shot. Boser gets the finish. So could Philipe Lins do that in this matchup? Sure he could. I mean, 66% of the fans going with Lins to get the win over in our Instagram poll. Alex Fox saying, I don't like the way OSP looked his last time out. Lins has a good chin too. I don't know if I'd say Lins doesn't have that great of a chin. I don't know if I'd say that. Like, you do look at the guys that have beaten him. And again, like Tanner Boser's been able to go out there, get the knockout win. Who else? Vadim Nemkov, Kleber Silva, Kelly Knudsen, but that was an injury.
Good.
So there have been guys that have been able to crack him. And obviously some of those losses due to injury. The lower volume of OSP, we'll see how it goes. But for me, I looked at the odds at the start of the week. That was kind of more, part of the reason why I took OSP. But Lins open minus 130, minus 220 right now. OSP open plus 110, plus 180. I'm going to keep going with OSP in this one. Chandler Witt saying almost disrespectful the way you cited Nemkov. No, I'm saying Nemkov is a good fighter, and he knocked out Philipe Lins. It was a little bit of the opposite. So, Matt, we're split on the pick on this one. I'm going with a big underdog, apparently, in Ovince St. Preux to get the win. But it's more of a slight on poor Philipe Lins. And that line on Tapology, all the fights that have fallen out for Philipe Lins. What could have been, right, Matt? What could have been?
I got to be honest, I was never high on Philipe Lins. You can go back and watch our earlier prediction videos. I was not high on this guy to begin with. It's just OSP, I think it's over for him, and it has been for a while. Like, he beat Shogun, but that was one of the worst fights you could ever watch where neither guy really threw much of anything. And I think with fights like that, he's going to get beat quite soundly by Lins.
Chandler Witt, my apologies. It sounded like you meant he's got a bad chin to get knocked out by Nemkov. No, Nemkov's had one bad fight in Bellator. It was the first one against there's levels to this, Corey Anderson. And then in the second fight, he came right back. So in this matchup, Matt, in our next fight, this one's at 145, the return of Khusein Askhabov. He hasn't fought in about 3 years. He's 23-0. And Matt, I know we differed on this pick as well. There is so much support out there for Khusein Askhabov. He's got like the hundreds of thousands of millions of followers on Instagram, just a legion of fans. But when I look at this fight, like, I don't understand the support because you haven't seen the guy in 3 years. You have no idea if he's going to look better. I assume he looks better. He's very young. He's only 28. He's fought poor competition. His last win was over a guy that was 3-1. Somebody put out there in the comments section, he's been brought up the right way. He's been fighting the right guys. When you're 22-0 and you're fighting guys that are 3-1, that's not being brought up the right way. That's being fed cans. So I do like the wins that Khusein Askhabov has. He's got a combat sambo background, a karate background. You see that in his fights. He has a speed advantage in this fight for sure, unless he's been eating potato chips on the couch for 3 years. I don't know how it's going to translate. And likewise for Jamall Emmers, like if this fight was put together 3 years ago, I would have said Jamall Emmers, hands down, easy pick. But Emmers has now been out for what? A year and a half. He had that knee injury against Pat
Exactly.
Sabatini.
We can't really gloss over that.
No, he spent time MMA Gold, Pinnacle MMA, as well as Team Alpha Male. I really like this fight. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's just hard to tell what you're going to get out of either guy. To have a ton of confidence making a pick either way.
You are right, but again, I feel like we bring up the negatives for Askhabov and really highlight those, and then just kind of skim over the fact that Emmers has been out for a year and a half with a pretty major knee injury at 33 years old in a division where 33-year-olds don't often thrive at, and that's really where a lot of my pick comes from. For Askhabov, he's got a lot of high... What do you mean?
How old's Alexander Volkanovski?
How old's the guy with the belt around his waist who's already done all the work
Josh
to get
Emmett
there?
fought for the title the other weekend. He was high.
These
30s.
guys are fighting for the title. Jamall Emmers just lost and hasn't fought in a year and a half. I don't think they're in the same boat, Craig, at all. My point is, it's been a long time out. He did look good in the opening moments against Sabatini, but immediately got reversed and suffered a major knee injury. With Emmers, he could look like the guy that he used to, but it's going to really take this performance for me to then get more confidence in what he's going to look like. I'm just concerned about some of the grappling defense and that knee injury for Emmers. The pick is Askhabov, but again, I do agree with everything you said. The record is quite fluffed. Again, he's not fighting world beaters on the regional scene, but the skills that he was able to show against those guys were still very high level. He's still a very well-rounded mixed martial artist. He has very fast hands, very fast flurries. I think those are really going to help him in this fight.
What I really did like, Matt, because I'm switching between comments, between graphics, between everything. But what I do really like about Askhabov, and we touched on this at the start of the week, we haven't talked about it yet, the fact that he's the much flashier striker, but even when he goes for flashy spin attacks, this and that, he then gets himself into a good position to go for the takedown. So even if he misses on something, he's able to succeed in another area of his game. And obviously his biggest win, we talked about it, it was over Donovan Desmay, the former Cage Warriors title challenger who fought, oh boy, a guy that wants to move up to lightweight for some reason, and Ilya Topuria. But when you look at that fight, Askhabov, he was able to go out there, control large amounts of time in the fight. He was able to get good takedowns. And in a fight like this against Emmers, if he's able to put his wrestling shoes on, he could have a lot of success. In the striking, I would be surprised. But for me, again, I do struggle going with Askhabov in this matchup. I haven't seen him in 3 years. He looked good on the regional scene against some poorer fighters. Askhabov opened a big favorite. He's minus 155 right now. So you've got a slight underdog in Jamall Emmers at a plus 130. Eager to see what the fan vote is at Fight Night Picks for this one. 68% going with Askhabov. Again, he's got the hand speed, but he's more of a single shot striker. When he gets his takedowns, he kind of rides it out in full guard. He doesn't really switch his position. So I like Emmers to be the busier fighter, to do a little bit more, to land a little bit more damage, but I can definitely see the upside for Askhabov, guys. I know I've set this up in one way, but if we come back, in 3-4 months' time, we preview another Khusein Askhabov fight, it's not going to be all doom and gloom. We're definitely going to get to learn a lot more about him tonight. Hopefully we do, and it's not just like a 10-second knockout for either guy, but I'm really looking forward to this fight in a really, really busy division that is featherweight.
It should be a really good one. I just favor the prospect quite a bit.
All right, so you got Askhabov. I have Emmers. We move into our next fight, Matt. Nazim Sadykhov. Harry Connick likes a freaking lasagna, representing Longo Weidman MMA. He's going to be taking on Evan Elder. And this is one of those fights where both guys' skill sets match up really, really quickly. And I know what I said in the last video, I'm going to kind of contradict myself a little bit, but the speed advantage, Nazim Sadykhov. This is a guy that can switch it up from both stances, as can Evan Elder. To me, I really like the complete package that is Nazim Sadykhov. I haven't seen him tested against a guy like Elder yet, which might sound silly because for Elder, he didn't really take on the highest of highest level competition on the regional scene. But I do like the fighter that is Evan Elder. And I think if Elder loses this fight, like he's one of those guys that they put in the wings as an alternate for the Ultimate Fighter, because you probably saw some of those names that popped up on the next season. Apparently, he'd be a guy that maybe just slots right in there. I want to know if the names that I saw yesterday on Twitter are the real names that are on that show. Like, is Timur Valiev actually going to be on the Ultimate Fighter? Because if so, that's messed up. But when I do look at this fight, Matt, Sadykhov, Elder, I think we're on the same wavelength on this fight.
The only thing that I'll slightly disagree with is if Elder loses this fight and doesn't look great, I don't really know where he goes after that. 0-2 against Preston Parsons and Nazim Sadykhov. Like, that's not the best guys to be 0-2 against. That's all I'm saying. So for Elder, I think this is a really important fight for his career. I think he can have a lot of success, but I brought this up a lot at the start of the week on purpose. Nazim Sadykhov moves extremely well in those half moon pivots when he's in the pocket. He'll like half step almost past his opponent, throw body shots. It's a really nice look. Now, when he does that, sometimes he'll put his head straight down, and it is because he's a tall fighter. So I think against a lot of fighters in the lightweight division, he does kind of have to look down at them. So hopefully it's not just a weakness in his game. It's something he just has to do because of how big he is. But I do like that part of his pocket striking. I think he has good power. I think he has fast hands, and he stays comfortable in uncomfortable positions, which isn't something you often see for a guy who's only 7-1.
No, and he definitely has a good game plan and a good strategy coming into a matchup like this against a guy like Evan Elder. And likewise for Elder, we mentioned this at the start of the week. We did have a fighter that competed a couple of weeks ago, taking on Yusaku Kinoshita, and Fugate was able to get a really crazy win, really kind of similar in stance, similar in game plan. So if Evan Elder went out there, got a win, it wouldn't be the biggest of surprise, but Sadykhov 68%, again, going with Sadykhov to get the win in this matchup, 32% with Evan Elder, and for both of us going with Sadykhov in the matchup. Now, Matt, I made a little bit of a mistake, and look at that. I'm going to have to switch around a couple of things here and put the right graphic up, but we'll talk about Mayra Bueno Silva, because for some reason, I can't get the overlay to go in there, but when you look at a fighter like Mayra Bueno Silva taking on Lina Lansberg, I know for Lansberg, it hasn't been all roses, especially of late, but she has a good opportunity to switch things around. So there we go. We get the right one right there. Lansberg lost 3 fights in a row. And for Mayra Bueno Silva, kind of the opposite flip of the coin, she just continues to win and having success at 135 pounds, which is where she competed before the UFC. Eager to see both these women in the cage because sometimes Lansberg has success with her Muay Thai from the outside, but most of the time she likes to clinch up, throw those elbows, and get dirty with it, kind of like a Joanne Wood type fighter. Whereas for Mayra Bueno Silva, she's at her best when she's marching fighters down. But as soon as the opposite fighter offers up a little bit of resistance, that's where Mayra Bueno Silva's game plan can kind of get a little tricky. So I'm eager to see Silva training full time out of Florida for this camp, getting ready for the matchup to see what the coaches kind of have up their sleeve for a game plan in a fight like this.
To me, this fight's an important skill check for Mayra Bueno Silva, but it's not the most difficult fight that she's had in her career, just based on what we've seen out of Lansberg. Like, this isn't a hot take to say a 40-year-old elbow queen isn't necessarily in the prime of her career. Now, if she goes out there and fights a very similar game plan that she had against Macy Chasson, 3.5 years ago, then yes, maybe the physicality could start to pay off for her, but I just think on the outside, with her lack of activity or lack of kicks, if she's not able to just get long periods of clinch control and a lot of clinch damage in this fight, I don't really know how she's going to be able to go out there and win a lot of rounds. And I see it got highlighted there, Silva by decision. That's probably the most likely outcome for this matchup, because for Bueno Silva, Lansberg's tough, right? Like, Bueno Silva's probably not going to go out there and TKO her. Exactly. She's not going to just one punch her like Jessica Andrade could do. She's not going to guillotine her 5 seconds into the fight. Like, Lina Lansberg is a very difficult fighter to finish, and for those reasons, Bueno Silva is going to have a really good gas tank in this matchup, but she's the more skilled fighter. She has the more avenues to get a win. And for those reasons, I like Silva.
I think it would probably surprise you. And I guess when we made the video last Friday, there weren't a lot of people that had voted on Tapology. It was still pretty early. So things were skewed all over the place. And then as the week went on, maybe some of the more astute followers that were watching some of the tape, they went out there, they voted on Tapology, but 93% have Bueno Silva on our Instagram to get the win in this matchup. Last weekend, 93% had Takugov to beat Elvis Brenner in the first fight, UFC 284. So unfortunate the way that one ended up. I have Bueno Silva in this one as well. I think she's going to have a great opportunity. Somebody's saying my nose is bleeding. No, my nose is not bleeding. I just have a really crooked nose, and that's the way the shadow looks. So that's just the way that it goes, Matt. So we move on to our next fight. The all-time UFC winner, Jim Miller. We don't need to see what's going on in the background. Is this like a Brian Wilson when he played for the San Francisco Giants with the gimp walking around in the back? Jim Miller taking on Alexander Hernandez. Trust me, I'll never forget. That man was like my favorite closer. You got him, you got Manny Del Carmen and Daniel Bard as two setup guys for the Red Sox. But when it comes down to this matchup, Matt, Jim Miller, Alexander Hernandez, a very, very fun fight for sure. And Hernandez getting that opportunity at lightweight, like Trey Lewis, stick down in Dallas. It's working again, the piece. So a good opportunity for him to get off the schneid. And he did just get finished back in December. And it wasn't like he got knocked out like Greg Hardy did last night at BKFC, but he did absorb a lot of damage.
That's the big problem with Alexander Hernandez. You can't critique his skills because he is very skilled. You can critique how he fights when he's tired, though. So fight IQ, I guess. And his durability, because in every Alexander Hernandez fight, win, lose, or draw, he's probably going to get wobbled at least once. Now, the difference between him and a guy like Michael Bisping is, remember Bisping, even in his prime, he'd get hit by the biggest shot you've ever seen, go down, get up, and be fine. It was like nothing happened. For Hernandez, he doesn't necessarily recover all that well after he does get hit by a big shot. And I think for that reason, I am still sticking with Jim Miller. Now, he is a pretty decent sized underdog, and for pretty obvious reasons. The guy has a ton of miles on him at this point, and he's, 39 years old, and it's a tough 39. Like, Jim Miller's been around. He's done that. But he still fights like a guy who isn't in his prime. I won't say that, but he's still very durable. He's old like Glover Teixeira, not old like Shogun Rua. And I think for those reasons, unless he does just get completely out-grappled, which I admit is a possibility, it's just with Hernandez, he doesn't really go out there and just purely wrestle. Yes, he will wrestle in his fights, but I don't think he's going to go out there and just put the wrestling shoes on and not strike at all. I think he will stand on the outside a little bit against Miller, use some of that movement that he likes to use, and then he'll try to time some of those takedowns. But again, unless Hernandez just goes out there and gets like 15 minutes of ground control time, I do like Jim Miller on the feet because I think he's the much more dangerous fighter.
No, and I mean, for me, and we touched on this when we made the video last week, was the fact that Jim Miller is 6-3 since 2019. He continues to win bonuses in a lot of these fights. But you look at the guys that he's beating, and likewise, it's the exact same flip of the coin argument for a guy like Alexander Hernandez. Neither one of these guys is beating like top 20 level competition. For Alexander Hernandez, the last 3 wins, Trinaldo, and there was a huge argument that Trinaldo won that fight, Chris Gritzmacher, and Mike Breeden. For Jim Miller, the wins since 2019, Roosevelt Roberts, Clay Guida, Jason Gonzalez, Eric Gonzalez, Nicholas Mata, and Donald Cerrone. So it is a tough one.
But like the last time Hernandez fought a genuine top-level 155er, Drew Dober fed him his lunch. And like Drew Dober's barely in the top 15. That's how good the lightweight division is right now. So both guys really need to impress if they do want one of those big fish next. And for Hernandez, that's what he's looking at, because Miller can go in there with any other vet, and that's going to be a fun fight you can put on the main card of pretty much any single fight night. For Hernandez, he really needs to look good in this fight to have any kind of promise in the future to get some kind of big name opponent again.
I think, it's got to be a win, rinse, repeat, get a little bit of money in the back of the pocket and then keep moving, because I see it over there. Drake Levy saying, going with Miller after round 1. If you look at it for Hernandez, look at his last 2 fights. Moicano had success pretty well everywhere. It was an accumulation of damage and a little bit of fatigue on Hernandez's part. Hernandez goes for the takedown. He ends up getting bucked and finished. And then in his last fight against Billy Quarantillo, Hernandez won the first round. He looked really good. And then in round 2, he slowed down significantly, and that's where he ended up getting finished. I do have Hernandez in the matchup because when I look at the 2 fights that Jim Miller had, the one against Vince Pichel, the one that he had against Joe Selecki, he struggled kind of getting that open space on the mat to then open up his grappling. And Jim Miller's not like a fish out of water when he's on his back on the mat whatsoever. Like, he's really good at syncing up submissions. But for me, I do like Alexander Hernandez. The MMA holes saying Terrence and Philipe, the MMA holes doing the damn thing out there as well in the space. And I haven't watched South Park in a meaningful amount of time, Matt. Next fight, William Knight, the Nightmare, taking on Marcin Prachnio. I know the MMA holes are big William Knight fans. They were in our chat one day talking quite a bit about him because we picked against him in one of the fights. But William Knight, he has a fight. He's taking on Marcin Prachnio. Matt, this fight feels like it feels like when you were a kid and I remember this vividly. Your parents give you a sparkler and then it sparkles out. And then it's like 2 minutes later and you go to pick it up again and you grab, not the handle, you grab the wrong end and burn the F out of your hand. You could get burned on this fight for sure.
Yeah.
That's the handoff. Like, I got a burn hand.
Wow. It's an interesting fight because the loser won't go home, I guess. But like, you wonder, you really do. Because for William Knight, the highs are definitely high. We could talk about his knockout power. We can talk about just like, what an absolute freak this guy is when he does put his hands together and when he is an aggressive fighter. But the problem is, if he's just left on the outside in a mixed martial arts fight where he has to think about the takedown, he has to worry about his opponent's kicking range or even get the respect of their own punches. William Knight's just kind of a sitting duck on the outside. Now, against Prachnio will march forward, so hopefully it will result in an entertaining fight because Marcin Prachnio, probably the worst thing about him is that he walks forward a little bit too much. So again, hopefully it will just make for the most entertaining version that this fight possibly can be at. But again, you brought it up at the earliest part of the video. William Knight looked really good, I thought. So congrats to William Knight at 206. I don't know how that guy can go from like 250 to 206 and back and forth like that. It's insane to me. But anyways, I think if Praggnio does resort back to that style of, hey, I'm going to try to use my kicks, but not really set them up. I'm going to be open to my opponent's big punches. I could see William Knight walking in there getting an easy knockout. But the thing is, if Praggnio fights with some of the more advanced movement that we have seen in some of his past fights, he could go out there like Christoph Jotko his way to a win. Weird name to bring up, but.
Prince Vegeta-san saying, didn't William Knight fight Rampage Jackson like 2008? No. But, Parker Porter fought John Jones at about that time. And then he's getting knocked out on a pay-per-view card. When I look at this fight, Matt, who's the better striker to these two guys? Who's the more fluid and mixes their technique in? Is the guy with karate background? Yeah, probably is. I'd say it's Marcin Praggnio. Who's got better kicks? Well, Praggnio uses them more often than Knight. Who's got the more well-rounded skill set? I'd probably say William Knight. Now, for Praggnio, if you do look at it, he had a great first round against Philipe Lins, and then he kind of tailed off as that fight went on. Whereas William Knight's one of those guys, obviously you worry a little bit about the cardio. One of the last times you saw him out there, or the last time you saw him out there, was against Devin Clark, where he struggled with the takedown. Threat of the takedown of a guy like Marcin Praggnio is fairly low, so it should open up the game of Knight in this matchup to me. But you look at the odds in the fight, William Knight is a slight favorite. Opened at par, he's minus 130. Praggnio opened at par, he's plus 110. So if we have a look at Fight Night picks over on our Instagram story, 65% going with Knight to get the win. But like I said, this is like grabbing a sparkler after a couple of minutes. It's still pretty hot. It's still pretty scary. I do have Knight ever so slightly, but if Marcin Praggnio went out there and hit like a pullback counter left hook and knocked out William Knight, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Would be kind of crazy. I have William Knight. I think if he hurts Praggnio, we could probably get him out of there. But again, like you said, for all the reasons you brought up, Praggnio is the better striker on the outside, especially with some of his kicks. And if he's able to keep the fight at that range, he should be able to win. I just don't think he's going to be able to maintain that range once he gets it there.
Matthew, maybe that's you commenting anyway, just trying to throw people off, saying Marcin Praggnio wins in the comments. But Fender Jazz, totally get the sparkler reference, Craig. Yeah, we've all been there before. The barbell did show up too, so the barbell is here. I just got to get over this cold, and then we'll be just tossing the plates. Matt, in our next fight, you talk about a guy that's tossing the plates. 266 pounds of pure muscle and steel. Josh Parisian taking on Jamall Pogues. And when you look at this matchup, Matt, Jamall weighing in 1 pound more than he did on Dana White's Contender Series, keeping it consistent from 248.5 to 249.5. You look at this fight, and I see Michael saying this fight is tough to pick. And hopefully you're talking about this fight. This is another one, guys. Like 7 debuting fighters next weekend's card, 6 debuting fighters on this weekend's card, and it's just a whole lot of filler. But when it comes to this matchup, Matt, Jamall Pogues making the UFC debut against Parisian. What's the pick in the fight?
I've got Jamall, but I don't think this is going to be a good fight to watch. And I'm one of these people who tries to get on here and tries to say, hey, these co-main events in the heavyweight and light heavyweight division that we keep on getting are just main card fights that we keep on getting in the light heavyweight and heavyweight division. They're going to be better than you think they are. I don't think this is going to result in the best fight, because if Parisian's going to win, he's kind of got to grind his way to a victory. I don't think he can stand at range, hold his hands up, and be kind of an awkward striker like we've seen in some of his past fights. Like, he's going to have to wrestle. He's going to have to use his clinch control. And in the heavyweight division, unless it's like Fabricio Verdum in 2014, that rarely results in a very entertaining fight. So I do have Jamall as the prediction, but this is a fight where, like, you know, get something to eat, you turn the oven on, make some monster sticks, you know, you get ready for the next fight. That's what this fight's for.
Josh Parisian understands that body weight, and kind of like a guy, like we sold you on the best version of what Blagoy Ivanov could be a couple of weeks ago against Marcin Tybura. What's the best version of Blagoy Ivanov? Low output, power shots. He grabs you. He tries to kind of pull your neck down, wear on you with his weight, make it a gritty fight, win by decision. Blagoy Ivanov fight. What do? You go to the corner store down the way and you grab a Megaloads bar, or at least that's what I do. And Josh Parisian fights in a similar manner. He can throw a little bit more volume than a guy like Blagoy. He pushes your back up against the cage, rinse and repeat, tries to tire you out. Jamall, I don't know if the output's there with a guy like Parisian, which might sound odd. He throws bigger, longer shots.
Combat Sambo, though, that Blagoy
Chandler
does.
Witt, random question. Have you guys ever predicted a card 100% correct? One time.
So,
Do you know how hard that is, Chandler Witt? So hard. I think, Matt, you did it once too.
I might have even done it twice, not to pat myself on the back.
Yeah, it's so hard. You have no idea. Jamall Pogues, I think he has better footwork. He's an odd type of heavyweight that can scramble off bottom, and I like his jiu-jitsu in a matchup like this. So For me, I do have Pogues, but this is one where at a minus 250, you feel good about that with Jamall Pogues. Let's just load up.
Well,
we made it minus 250 Jamall Pogues against a guy like Josh Parisian. Not a chance. I see this as a pretty 50-50 fight in a guy's debut. I'll take Pogues, but it's not with a ton of confidence.
Against a guy like Josh Parisian, whose last wins have come against Alain Badeau and Rocky Martinez. Like, if you're going to be a minus 250 against anybody, it's going to be against Josh Parisian. Yeah, I got Jamall in this fight. I don't know if that's how we're going to sell it.
One of these guys,
who beat Alain Badeau, who you admit it shouldn't be in the UFC. And
one of these
Martinez is like 55.
One of these two guys got a cup to the face in the fight, and it wasn't Jamall Pogues. So, Matt, we'll move on to our next fight. Jordan Wright taking on Zach Paunga. In this matchup, you have a guy that got knocked out in an Ultimate Fighter finale against a guy who's gotten finished or won by finish in every fight under the Zuffa banner, including Dana White's Contender Series. Jordan Wright moving up to 205. Zach Paunga moving down because he fought at heavyweight on the Ultimate Fighter, but typically a light heavyweight in life, or at least in all of his other fights. So you look at this matchup, Matt. Now, Jordan Wright, he has fought at 205 in the UFC. He weighed slightly under in the fight that he had, and he's at 204 in this one. I can't remember who you had. Maybe that's because I'm sick, but
I had Paunga. You had Wright.
You had Paunga, and I knew I had Wright. So, but you look at it, I mean, for Jordan Wright in the UFC, it's been just like a barrel of monkeys. It really has been.
He's been finished in 3 straight. That's tough.
He has. Now, Bruno Silva finished him. Oblindado. Marc-André Barrio finished him. And then Dusko Todorovic, the wins. Jamie Pickett, Ike Villanueva. He beat Gabriel Checo over with LFA, a guy who lost to Rashad Evans on a career resurgent comeback. And then Anthony Hernandez was the no contest, but it was a loss on Dana White's Contender Series. It's a tough fight to try and give you a great prediction on, because for me, Zach Paunga is a very steady fighter, and that's about all I have to say.
It's a weird fight. This is why I have Zach and not Jordan Wright. Wright, I don't know how he's going to fight a guy who's about the same size as him the way that he fights, because he's really good at long range, like with his kicks and with his straights and whatnot, but defensively he's not good from that position. So Paunga's just happy to be on the outside and then hit him with a couple flurries here and there. If Jordan Wright keeps on pulling back with his chin up, I think Zach's just going to be able to hit him with a couple of those big shots, probably hurt him early. And then if Wright does get hurt, he's a little bit like Alexander Hernandez, to where, hey, he gets rocked. It's tough for him to recover. And then I could see him getting finished shortly thereafter. But this is the weird thing about this fight. It's a close fight where either guy could win by first round stoppage. Like if Wright won via TKO 30 seconds into it, I wouldn't be surprised at all. But if Paunga won by the exact same method, I also wouldn't be surprised. Like it's a close fight, even though it's not going to be close.
You think about it and you look at the fight like this, you look at a guy like Austin Laxton's comment, right, is literally live by the sword, die by the sword, like that Slash song. Like it's a Slash album. I play guitar, you sing it, but it's a Slash song. There is no reward to live and die by the sword. And if you look at it for a guy like Jordan Wright, there hasn't been much reward in the last 3 fights. They've been fun. The fan vote on this one, 56% Paunga, 44% for Jordan Wright. I like the storm that Jordan Wright has in that first round. I don't like it as the fight goes on. Obviously, it does scare me. But for Zach Paunga to be a guy that is more of a, not a decision fighter, but he's more of he brings it in a wave. And it's a wave that doesn't have the peaks and valleys like a guy like Jordan Wright. I will go with Wright in the matchup. I don't know what the odds are in this one. Paunga open minus 195, minus 276. Jordan Wright opened as the underdog, and he's still around there, like a plus 225. So Wright's pretty big underdog. I guess this is the week where I end up with a whole bunch of these big underdogs. But for me, I'll go with the finishing ability of a Jordan Wright. But this is one of those ones.
Paunga, but fighting Jordan Wright is like hitting home runs at Coors Field. Anybody can do it. Like it's like you become a pretty good finisher when you fight Jordan Wright. That's all I'm saying. Like I wouldn't think, oh, this guy's gone to decision before, he can't finish Jordan Wright. Like Jordan Wright is 1-4 in his last 5 fights, and he has been stopped in all 4 of those losses. I just think we have to talk about that.
Boats and 37 saying worst co-main event ever. No, Jake Collier, Chase Sherman last January was worse than this.
I think this is worse.
Jessica Andrade taking on Aaron Blanchfield, Matt, in the main event. Again, thank you so much for everybody that's tuned in on this Saturday afternoon. We haven't had the chance to say that. The likes are really appreciated. The comments section is going nuts. Really like to hear from everybody in this main event over there in the comments section, because Andrade filling in on a week's notice for Taila Santos taking on Erin Blanchfield. A few weeks ago, it was announced that Blanchfield Santos is going to move from 3 rounds up to 5. So still a short notice change. This one's going to be up there at 5, or it will be 5 rounds. And for Andrade, she put a drubbing, an absolute drubbing against Lauren Murphy. So eager to see how this one goes. But Matt, this is kind of a strange fight because Andrade, off her last win, she wanted Zhang Wei Li. Now Andrade, before this fight, she wants Zhang Wei Li, even if she wins. It's weird to hear somebody winning multiple fights in a different division then wanting to conquer, strawweight. Like, it's strange that way, is it not?
When you're the number 1 contender in 2 divisions, you might as well just call everybody out,
it's like
everybody.
It's like Anderson Silva years ago when he's middleweight champ. Yeah, I'll fight Forrest Griffin. Screw it.
Yeah, but he did that a number of times. He moved up to 205. I would say that was more normal. I think Erin Blanchfield's going to have better cardio than Jessica Andrade in this fight, even though I think Jessica Andrade has really good cardio. Now, she is taking it on short notice, like you have mentioned. It's short notice for Blanchfield too, but much less so, and that has to be stressed. So for Andrade, for me, I'm still picking Andrade, but I think there's a lot of red flags for her in this matchup because if she's not able to damage Erin Blanchfield enough in the first 2.5 rounds, I could see it being a very difficult fight in that 3rd, 4th round because even if everything's going wrong for Erin Blanchfield and she is just able to stay in the fight until the 4th round to where Andrade doesn't have takedown defense, think about Juliana Pena when she fought Amanda Nunes. Amanda Nunes was destroying her, got tired, got taken down, and choked out. So I could see this fight, oddly enough, following a very similar script as that title fight did. But again, Jessica Andrade has the far heavier hands, is the way better striker, is the more physically strong out of the two, and she is a good grappler at the end of the day. So I don't think she's just going to get held down on the ground. For those reasons, I'm picking Andrade, but again, I can't stress this enough. This is the best case scenario for Erin Blanchfield by far. If you lose to Santos, it's a tough loss for your career, and people like us might respect it as, hey, you lost to one of the best fighters in the division. You might get better after it. But now if you lose to Jessica Andrade, everyone in the world is going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Hey, you lost to the number 1 contender in 2 divisions. No shame in that whatsoever. And if you beat Andrade, you beat a fighter who we have both called many times a future Hall of Famer. That is a massive feather in your cap, and it's a massive name on your resume.
So there's been so much support for Erin Blanchfield this week from the Fight Night Picks community, from the Twitter community that I've seen out there, from the limited bit that I've looked, but 62% going with Andrade to get the win on our Instagram page. And there's people out there that are saying, well, do you remember the Andrade fight when she fought Sarah Morris and she got her back taken? Yeah. Do you remember how she got submitted by Marion Renault and Raquel Pennington? Yeah. That was at 135 pounds. And that was 8 years ago. So a fighter can definitely get better off of losses. The fight that I go back to and I look at in this one, and I could see it kind of playing out the similar way. If you like Erin Blanchfield, by all means, it's that Sexy Mexi fight against Willie Cat. John Castaneda taking on Daniel Santos. And in that fight, Castaneda looked good in the first round. He had trouble making the weight. And then in the second round, he was tired. Willie Cat took over. He ends up going out there and getting the win. Short notice fight for Andrade after beating the brakes off of Murphy. And Castaneda was in the same bubble. He was beating guys. He was looking really good. Now, I know Eddie Wineland was one of those guys. Then Miles Johns was the other. But it was a big surprise out of left field to me that Daniel Santos won that fight. It would surprise me if Erin Blanchfield won the fight, but if you see Andrade tiring, if you see Blanchfield going out there, getting an easy takedown as it goes on, the trouble for me in taking Blanchfield is just a couple of fights ago, I saw her struggle with the striking and the boxing of JJ Aldrich. I don't know if the boxing has improved that much in this amount of time to where she's going to be able to go out there and strike with Andrade or get easy takedowns against somebody like Andrade, because again, taking down Molly McCann is a lot different than taking down Jessica Andrade. I know Valentina Shevchenko had a lot of success against Andrade, but now we're starting to get up there into that upper echelon. We're talking about the 10th ranked fighter who hasn't necessarily taken on that level of competition just yet. So again, a lot of people really going with Blanchfield out there. A lot of people really supportive of her. I've loved to see this career arc of such a top prospect like Erin Blanchfield, but I find myself picking Andrade. If Blanchfield wins this fight, Matt, I mean, she is off to the races. She gets that title shot over, like you leapfrog Fyodo, and then you're in the wings of whoever wins between Grasso and Shevchenko.
Maybe. I'd like to see the Fierro fight, personally. The Santos fight's still out there, too. Like, that's the thing. I think 125 is probably the best women's division right now. 115 is still really good, too. 135 is just so depleted because Amanda Nunes has beat a lot of the top contenders at this point that, for me, there's not really a lot of contenders that I think, oh, wow, they're going to offer such a big challenge. But I think 125, there's enough fighters right now making their way up. Manon Fiorot, Erin Blanchfield. Santos made a really good account for herself last time out. I think an Andrade rematch against Shevchenko could be a fun fight, too. But I do think Blanchfield could hold Andrade down. Again, I have Andrade, but I think there's two very specific ways Erin Blanchfield could win this fight. It's holding Andrade down for long periods of time, because Andrade will go for guillotine. She will jump to her back and try to go for submissions over positions. And I think that's an area where Erin Blanchfield can take advantage of. So I wouldn't be very surprised if Erin Blanchfield won this fight, but I am still picking just Andrade.
JH138, Aldrich also had never been subbed before. Clay saying Santos deserves a rematch. Valentino will maul Grasso. I'm really eager to see that fight. And striking in it, Matt. This is Fight Night Picks, Kicks. I'm sick on this Saturday, so we're split apart. But once we do the videos for Krylov, who's taking on Span, well, we should be back together. I do feel better today, so that is good. But we re-up through this card, offer up those final picks and predictions. Nothing changed this week, and everybody made weight, so you do like to see that. Juancamilo Ronderos taking on Clayton Carpenter. I'm going with concrete Clayton Carpenter to get the win.
Same here.
Already mixed Clayton Carpenter. Next matchup, AJ Fletcher taking on Themba Gorimbo. Going with Fletcher, but this is a volatile matchup.
AJ Fletcher could fight a box full of pool noodles. It could probably be fight of the night. It really could be. I have him in this matchup, but he could lose to anybody and also beat anybody with his style. So no result would surprise me whatsoever.
Yeah, put that on a highlight reel. Nothing would surprise me out of that matchup. The next one, Matt, Philipe Lin's taking on Ovince St. Preux. You're going with the astute pick, and I'm going with the pick out of left field. I'm going with Ovince St. Preux. Yours is the smarter, more reliable pick with a guy who has a more reliable game plan in Philipe Lin's.
Well, it's the more reliable pick because I'm picking a guy who doesn't look like he's completely past his prime, and I'm picking a guy who fought to basically a draw with the ghost of Shogun Rua. So, yeah, I feel pretty good picking Philipe Lin's in this one.
Give me the dog, Ovince St. Preux. Matt, Jamall Emmers taking on Khusein Askhabov. Give me the dog and Jamall Emmers in the matchup.
I'm worried about Emmers at his age with his knee injury. I brought that up a lot. I have Khusein in this matchup.
Bartholomew of Haywood's going out there. There's all these people kind of bickering about picks and this and that. You toss a super chat out there to us. That'd be cool. The next matchup, Mayra Bueno Silva taking on Lina Lansberg, going with Mayra Bueno Silva in the matchup.
I also have Bueno Silva. I just think she's way more well-rounded at this point in her career.
And one of her former dance partners is going to be taking on Tatiana Suarez next week. Suarez versus De La Rosa. Fun fight there. Next fight, Nazim Sadykhov taking on Evan Elder, going with Sadykhov in the matchup.
I also have Sadykhov, but this should be a fun fight.
Then we have Jim Miller, the all-time UFC winner, taking on Alexander Hernandez. Give me another underdog. No, Hernandez.
No, I have the underdog in this one.
Apologies. Yeah, Hernandez.
Jim Miller's like a plus 200. I just think he's more durable. Again, if these guys get into one of those like 1-for-1 exchanges, A, I'm going to lose my mind while I'm watching it. And B, I do favor Jim Miller in that style of fight at this stage of his career. You would never say that about a 39-year-old in any other division if it wasn't, I guess, Glover or Jim Miller. But he is one of these few vets, one of the rare few, who has maintained his durability this late into his career. Like, Dan Hooker finished him, and I remember being very surprised when he knocked him out with that knee, because Jim Miller had just fought Anthony Pettis, Dustin Poirier, like some really good fighters, and wasn't getting finished by them.
How crazy was it? Like him outstriking a good boxer, Nicholas Mott of the Southpaw. That was a crazy win for Jim Miller. So if you like Jim Miller, here's a great shot against a guy moving back up in weight who got finished just a couple of months ago in Hernandez. I have Hernandez. You have Miller. Pacquiao Knight, low confidence pick, and William Knight here.
Yeah, one of those fights where it could be a first-round finish either way, but I do have William Knight.
Another low-confidence one. Jamal Pogues to beat Josh Parisian, but we're really talking about a couple of heavyweights that are a ways away from the rankings here.
Yeah, but I still think Pogues is a much more dangerous out of these two, and that's why I have him.
At light heavyweight, Paunga taking on Wright. I'm living dangerously this week going with Jordan Wright, but this is going to be a fight that you're not going to want to miss because I feel like it could be over a drop of a hat.
Exactly. This is this is one of the more volatile matchups on the whole entire card, but I do have Zach Paunga.
And in the main event, Jessica Andrade taking on Erin Blanchfield. Matt, I've got Jessica Andrade in the fight, as do you.
I do, but I'm very curious to see what happens to her after this fight. Because like you had mentioned, it seems like the conversation is always, hey, could she fight for the title down at 115 again? A lot of her rivalries are down at that weight class because she was more established at 115, of course, being the champion down there than she is at 125. But you could throw her in with any female fighter on the roster. I am not joking. Like 135, 145. I know it's going to be too big physically, but that's how skilled she is. Andrade can make it a fun fight with just about anybody. I think this should be a great matchup because of how talented Erin Blanchfield has shown that she can be, but I do have Andrade.
Andrade versus Norma Dumont. Make the fight, book it. We want to see it. Or maybe Danielle Wolf. Big time weekend, Matt. Again, Krylov taking on Span. That is your next card that's coming up. There's 7 debuting fighters on that card. 6 coming up this weekend, making their respective UFC debuts. If you count Zach Paunga, because his last fight was on the Ultimate Fighter, so they wear the different shorts. A lot of stuff going on in the world of MMA, so make sure that you keep it tuned in with Fight Night Picks. Matt, a big-time weekend of fights. I know you're really looking forward to it. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say.
Let's get into it.